being able to think about future events, conceptualize future events, what life's going to be like 100, 200, 300 years from now, it's not that much different than actually experiencing that place in time through Limitless Mind of Russell Targ and Elon Musk being in the same basket. Maybe not. Here's the thing. Elon Musk, that would give me a C12 experience. Elon Musk talks about the time barrier a little bit, and the way he thinks about time is a lot of influence on the way I think about time, because in the videos on YouTube where he talks about that, I've listened to those videos probably 20 times, and so I feel like I have a pretty decent understanding of what he's trying to say and why he decided to start SpaceX is a large reason of why he thinks about time the way he does. And so I think about time pretty much the way he thinks about time, and I just take that as my cornerstone of where I'm at in terms of life philosophy. So that being said, imagine if time were stretched out 10,000 years or 100,000 years, what sort of things would be impossible to avoid? And that's where he takes some of his thought. What sort of things would be impossible to avoid? One of those things that would be impossible to avoid is, he says that, we're either going to be on a lot of planets or we're going to be extinct. And if we're going to be extinct, then none of this matters anyway. But if we're going to be on lots of planets, because why? Because the sun is eventually going to run out. And if, that's not going to happen in 100,000 years, that's not going to happen in 1,000,000 years. It'd probably take more than, I don't remember the math, but it would probably take more than a couple, tens of millions of years, if not hundreds of millions of years. And eventually, if you stretched it out and said, where are we going to be in 500,000 million years? That's a big number. As time approaches infinity is a great way to think. And he thinks that way, and I think that way. It's inspired my life mission. I'd like to share it with you. So, if time was stretched out far enough, we're either going to be extinct or on a lot of planets. And I think if time was stretched out far enough, there would need to be some sort of system that's able to, sort of like a ledger or an accounting system for the population of humans. Because if we're on more than one planet, which of course would probably only start out with 2, and then long after 2 it would only start out with 3, and long after 3 it would only start out with 4. But you imagine as time speeds up, it sort of accelerates. All of a sudden, we're going on, 2 or 3 new planets every month. And that's a really exciting sort of progression. The question is, how are human beings going to be able to account for where other human beings are? Suppose you want to find out where somebody, loved ones, maybe your loved ones go and live on this new planet on Mars, and you're going to stay on Earth, and you want to figure out, how to stay in touch with them. And the internet is going to change a million times over the next decade or 2 decades or 3 decades. The internet's going to change so much that we're not going to be able to understand it at all. We're not going to be able to even recognize this earlier version of the internet. Here it is, 2020 in this video. And 20 years from now, in 2040, the internet of 2020 is going to be like the Stone Age. It's going to be like using, animal bones for tools. It's going to be like that. It's not so far-fetched of an idea. That's actually how it's going to be. One of the ideas for a life mission is something called an interplanetary passport, because you'd imagine that with all these countries, if you're in the United States and you want to leave the country, you have to get a passport. You get your passport to leave the country. It's sort of an optional thing, and I think an interplanetary passport would be an optional thing too, but you'd imagine Mars would have its own government, and it would still facilitate with the same interplanetary passport system, which would be like the holding body. The interplanetary passport. What is this all about? What is this all about? The interplanetary passport is something that gets me excited. It's something that I call a life mission. Life mission is something that I get sort of excited about from time to time. One of those had used to be carbon removal. I might talk about later on. Well, there's 4 topics. The one before, so carbon removal is something that I thought was interesting and cool. As I mentioned one time, Elon Musk is actually, when he was speaking in a video about the ppm of carbon, he said that in our atmosphere you can measure carbon by ppm, stands for parts per million, and he said that the little extra carbon from the last 100 years or so has actually done the atmosphere some good, because we were in a low carbon state, and so over the last hundreds of years on Earth, the carbon in the atmosphere has fluctuated up and down on sort of like a sine wave, something that's pretty even. And so what we've done in putting carbon in the air over the last 50 years or 75 years or 100 years has actually not been too terribly bad. And so some people like to think that the air is so terrible now, and it's not too terribly bad if you look at just the carbon parts per million. But anything beyond that, so this was some of the initial thought on life missions, anything beyond that would be pretty harmful. So we don't want to get more than we have right now, but as long as we taper off and become more of a neutral, and there's a lot of companies now that are going neutral. I saw a commercial on YouTube just a few days ago for Shell, how they're going to be carbon neutral by a certain date or something like that. That's cool, because that's a big organization. Lots of small organizations do that. I mean, I remember getting tea bottles and things where it says carbon neutral project and Rainforest Alliance project. Those things are really important. Even on the Budweiser, it's one of the Budweiser bottles said it's all hydroelectric or something like that. Windmill farm electric. Wind is a really cool topic if you talk about why wind exists. It's all about pressure. There's always a high pressure and a low pressure. And wind is the movement of oxygen molecules and nitrogen molecules from one pressure to the next. It's sort of like a vacuum, the same thing that might pull you out of a plane, And it doesn't pull you out so much as it pushes you out. So carbon removal is something I thought used to be pretty cool. I initially got interested in it because of this video about Elon, when he said that we're actually okay now, we don't need to necessarily go that much lower. It's not about taking out, like I used to be really interested in taking carbon out of the atmosphere that exists. Some of these businesses exist now. I'm still really interested in it. They come out with newsletters, and so I used to subscribe to their newsletters. Probably I will subscribe to their newsletters again sometime in the future. Still, there are a lot of cool businesses that could have a dramatic impact of resource normative reformation. we would strive to profit from the extracted carbon, but a particularly non-invasive method is usually to store it deep underground, back where it belongs. A lot of these carbon extraction companies are right now. These companies exist, more than one. There's several. These companies are developing technologies, different membranes that are able to pull carbon. I think it's carbon dioxide, because you can't take out the carbon. There are lots of technologies, but they pull out CO2 because that's a lot easier and more economical to extract. If you were trying to extract the carbon itself, it would cost extraordinarily more money than is economically feasible at this point, because of the development of technology. Has not reached that cusp yet. But pulling out CO2 is getting pretty economical, and lots of companies are starting to do this. They come out in little pellets, sort of like little styrofoam balls that you might find in a beanbag chair. And it's just CO2 that's been extracted through a water sort of. It's like a water cycle sort of process, I think. It sort of heats up the air so that it creates little rain clouds that condensate, something like this, and then it goes through a membrane, comes out with these little pellets. And so they take these little pellets and just dig underground and put them underground. So these little tiny pellets of CO2, they dig underground and put them there because they don't really have any use in society. Trying to extract the carbon away from the oxygen and then give that carbon the purpose is not necessarily economical. At least not now. Maybe in 20 years or 35 years it would be economical, but right now it's just ridiculously, extraordinarily uneconomical, so they're just putting it underground. And that's what they're doing with it. I think that's really cool. It's still something later on. I want to get some investment money so that I can invest in a lot of these cool topics, because I think a lot of these companies are going to change the world. A lot of them already are, just by changing what's possible, developing these technologies that didn't used to exist, giving them new purposes. It's awesome to be up at the front edge. If the capturing technology becomes sophisticated to a high degree, it becomes cheap and gains mass adoption like anything else. And that causes the need to end carbon emissions far less necessary. Electric vehicles are a great preference nonetheless for the clean air. We must consider how we want the young in our communities breathing. In the big picture, I think less carbon emissions from petrol vehicles could reduce rates of child asthma throughout the country. In this country, it's not very bad. One of those countries on the other side of the world, I want to say maybe like Bangladesh or somewhere around there, these countries, they don't have natural gas like we have. In America, your furnace is natural gas, which is clean. It's a clean burning clean. In these other countries in the world, they're using coal in their house, and it's so cold that they have to use this coal furnace all the time, and so their children are developing these terrible lung diseases from coal burning furnaces in their own house, and they don't have the proper in order to keep a clean circulation of the air. There's a high level of pollution, extraordinarily high level of pollution. Those are the areas that need targeted the most, if you ask me, when it comes to carbon removal. Maybe I could be the international man that puts that together, get to know the partners. Who knows? Here's the deal. Our children, our pets, even ourselves are being poisoned 24/7, 365 from not only the types of vehicles we drive, but also the types of technologies we use. If you get a smartphone out of the box, it's always going to, in the first few pages, first 5-6 pages, are always going to be these warnings and these regulations and things where they say this is a high intensive electromagnetic device, and it's going to produce such and such radiation known to cause cancer and everything, and we just glance it over that and pretend like it's not even there, but it's a huge stinking big deal. Even from the types of light waves around us, including wireless connectivity of Wi-Fi and smartphones. I've got this dream vision for my new house and how it's going to be, and I've got like a switchboard on the wall where I can just turn a switch and it shuts off the Wi-Fi router in my house, because I don't want any Wi-Fi radiation poisoning my brain, poisoning my sleep cycles. You think that doesn't have an effect on you? Think again. Brain fog all day from the electromagnetic radiation. Nowadays they make these plugs you can plug. I've got a USB-C port in my phone. You can plug in a USB thumb drive. So now I used to transfer media from my laptop to my thumb drive. Now I just transfer it straight from my phone to my thumb drive, because I've got this little adapter that lets me do that. So it's a little file manager on my phone. Anytime I've got pictures, videos, music that I want transferred, I transfer it that way, straight from my phone to my USB drive, and listen to it in my car. They're making these same adapters for internet, that you can have wired phone internet. You may say, why the heck would you want wired phone internet? There's a lot of really, really great reasons why you would want wired phone internet. Nowadays, you've got to have a certain sort of adapter on your phone. I'm sure in the future it'll be even easier, because they've got those. You can get, it's like a 3.1 USB that adapts to a gigabit connection. The fastest speed, and it's actually faster. There's no interruptions. If you're on Wi-Fi and there's lots of other Wi-Fi users, the bandwidth has got to be throttled between the users. You get videos that are chopping out, but with a wired connection, every wired connection gets a super fast speed, and there's no interruptions. So there's a lot more benefits than just your health. So I imagine, like, I've got an extra wire in every room. Instead of just having a charging cable for my USB-Cs also in every room, I've got an Ethernet cable for my phone for when I want to turn the Wi-Fi off in the house, because it's almost never on. I mean, there's enough cell phone data coming in, just pay the extra bucks and get on the data plan.